Well, thank you for joining me today on Chasing the Divine podcast. I'm Michelle Minke, your host, and I'm so excited today to be bringing in Julie Handrahan, who is was a nurse for many, many years and has now transitioned into be an End of Life Doula. She has always had a heart for seniors, and I'm so excited to share how she got here and why an End of Life Doula could be important for you and your family's journey. So welcome, Julie. I am so thrilled to have you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. I mean, it is so lovely to connect with you. You know what? I really wanted to thank you. And it was like, how can I really thank Michelle for this opportunity? And I'll dive into it in a little bit. But you know what? Brene Brown, who I've just kind of really discovered, she studied vulnerability. And so I really want to thank you for making me vulnerable today, because we are in a new world. This is all new to me. This is my debut podcast, to be able to share it with you, but to put me in this space, because honestly, it's true. This is where true growth happens. And I also think that within these conversations that we're doing today, as an end of life doula, I'm asking people to be vulnerable. I'm asking people to open up probably some of the most difficult moments of their lives. But I've really found that when we're vulnerable, we grow, we empower, we change people. So thank you for having me,
Julie. And speaking of vulnerability, you have seen me in some of my worst, weakest moments. You also, how we know each other is through Care in the Creek, our hometown care center. And I believe one memory I love with you is when I thought my son Max had put a straw right up his nose. he told me that he had a straw up his nose, and I remember rushing in like sweatpants and crazy hair, and just being like, my son has the straw up your nose, and you guys were like, Michelle, there's no straw. There's no straw in his nose. So I love that memory with you, and also I remember loving you the moment I met you. You just have this amazing ability to connect with people, and to this heart of kindness, that just really shines through.
Oh, thank you.
So I remember those funny moments, and also how my son was drawn to you. And then I think how we have to, kind of come through this is that during my own healing is that I was always looking online for, who's local, who else is, doing interesting things, and how are people healing. And I saw your Transition Well End of Life Doula page and saw the work that you were doing. And so when we had a conversation a few weeks ago about all things that are afterlife, is when I just really realized the power of what you do. And I think it's so important for people to understand and to start to know about this. I think people don't know what an end of life doula is. We've heard of doulas, birth doulas. I had a birth doula for Max, and I think it's just something that people potentially are missing out on. So that's why I'd love for you to, how did you get here? Like, tell us, how did you become an end of life doula, Julie?
Do you know what? It's crazy, Michelle, because if you'd have asked me years ago what I would be doing in my 50s, I would never have even imagined an end of life doula and having this passion about dying and death. And I think maybe that comes with a whole lot of experiences over the years, right? So back in 2007, for years I was in sales and marketing, and it just wasn't sitting right with me anymore. And I just felt I wasn't being fulfilled, because it was all about somebody else. And more importantly, it was about chasing the almighty dollar. That's really what I felt. So at that time, I did a lot of soul searching and praying, right? And I just knew within my heart, I needed to be doing something. My calling is to help people. Always has been. I'm an empath. I'm one of the biggest empaths. And so in 2007, I said to my husband, I'm quitting the sales and marketing, because to me, that's a role. That's not a passion. right? For me, anyway, some people it is. But, I said, I've always been passionate and drawn towards seniors. So I said, I think I'm just going to take a break and I'm going to volunteer in a senior's home or what have you. And he said to me, he says, Julie, why don't you go and get a job with seniors and work with them? He says, that's always been where you love to be, where you have these great conversations. And so I, like, looking back and doing stuff like this, it helps in reflection and you really see your journey. And I honestly believe, like, you can see the hand of God. I can see the hand of God in my entire life. And these, when I look back, I see this and I'm going, wow, he has totally led me to where I am today. So in 2007, I went and I applied for as a healthcare aide in a long-term care facility. Green off the street, uncertified, nothing. I was hired. I was filling out my schedules by the time I was done. The interview, and when anything's easy, it's meant to be. The interview was so easy, and it was speaking. I spoke from the heart, and I brought in my experience, because even with 20 years of sales and marketing, there's a lot of experience that you can bring forth in any life change that you're going through, right? So I started there, and all through this journey, because you're meeting death at the forefront, these are these folks' final transition. You're saying goodbye to somebody in this physical realm, and helping them move and journey to the spiritual realm, right? And in that, those moments, there was beauty, of course, sadness. My most favorite part was actually being able to sit by the bedside and just hold somebody's hand and vigil and be with the families who are saying goodbye to their loved ones. It is so rewarding. But
well, Julie, I just have to pause there, because I can't imagine somebody like choosing to do that. Like I can't imagine the emotional impact, like, what you'd be taking home and being connected with people like that in those last days. Like, was it ever exhausting for you? Was it ever like, did it ever feel like too much? Some people are like, I could never help people, see them die, like as a living.
Yeah, and you're right, because it is crazy. But you know what really energized me, Michelle, because it is very emotional. And even I worked with incredible people, just incredible. And what really empowered me was being present and honoring this life. Because when you get into a long-term care situation, I always tried to take a step back, and in any situation, and especially if we look at our elders, if I had somebody say something to me at one time, Michelle, where, you reach your 50s, but you know what? There's still a 25-year-old. Like, I'm 53. There's still a 25-year-old inside this 53-year-old body, yeah. Right? And I think we have to recognize that each journey is unique. Each life is unique. And knowing that I was giving them, or being part of the best goodbye that we could give them at that time, empowered me, and it took out that heavy grief. Because if I left that room knowing I gave that person 110% of me while I was in that room, I did my job, and I did it well. And just to be a part of that whole process is a huge blessing. It really, really is.
And what a blessing. I'm sure you've been to so many people's families.
Oh, it is. And the unfortunate thing is when we get into our long-term care facilities and the one that I worked with, we have little snippets, Michelle, and that's the unfortunate thing, because we care for these folks. It might be 6 months, it might be 1 year, it might be 3 years, it might be 7 years. They become a part of us too. But in those moments, we're there for, say, an 8-hour shift. So in that we have snippets, because there's at that particular facility, I think there was 26 residents on a wing. So when you're caring for 26 people, right, you give them the best 5, 10, 15 minutes of your time that you can. That's how I worked.
Yeah.
Right? So when you can guide that family into the process, the dying process, and you understand, and if their breathing's difficult, if they're running a fever, like you can explain. So it becomes teaching moments too, but not just teaching moments. You're empowering these loved ones to be present and just take it as it comes and be that strength for them. So in 2014, because I'm always learning, I always want to learn, I went and did my LPN, so my practical nurse program. And like I said, for whatever reason, we are all given this path and just honoring this way. And like I said, looking back, God's hand was definitely in here. So I got into family medicine, as you said, here where we are, right? And what happens when you're in family medicine is you have to become present at some of the hardest visits. That I think this is where a lot of growth came for me. You would think it was in long-term care, but when they come into long-term care, they've already received their diagnosis. They've gone through all their evaluations. They've had numerous wonderful medical professionals in their whole journey, right? But when you get into family practice and somebody comes in and all of a sudden you get test results back and you know you're making that call for somebody to come in, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or you see somebody that's come in that's dealt with obviously dementia for far too long, but perhaps maybe lived in denial, and then you know what you're dealing with. And so many times, Michelle, over my years, I've seen people walk out of the clinic and deer in the headlights, fearful, in shock. And I'm going, you know what? We have a fabulous medical system. We're very fortunate in Canada. We're very fortunate in Alberta. But what happens is there's 24 hours, as we know, in a day. And me as a doula, so I've taken my experiences and I'm saying, hey, we can navigate this better. Like we can definitely navigate it. I know the resources, or I can find the resources. So I just felt that this wonderful system, we're really failing people because there is a void. And the beautiful part of an end of life doula role is we can come in and we can fill that void.
So,
right?
and so let's talk about that, because I think, I'm not sure if people even know what an end of life doula is. Like, can you walk us through what that would be like? So somebody's gotten a diagnosis, somebody's gotten a terminal illness, and they hire you, they go on this journey with you, and what are the steps you take? How do you, what is this doula position, and what does it, how do you support these people and their families?
Yeah, for sure. And it's, for me, when I come in, first and foremost, I want to say to everybody, I will meet you where you're at. That is the beauty of being present. So sometimes it could be early on in the diagnosis. Sometimes they could be living with a life-limiting diagnosis for some time. So I come in and meet you where you're at. Okay, and I think that's really important. No judgments, always creating safe space. Like I said at the beginning, we are being vulnerable and putting people in very vulnerable positions. And I cherish those moments when people open up. And one way I do it is and I invite them to share their journey thus far. Kind of like how we're doing right now. We're just having a wonderful conversation. So I'm sharing my journey as how I got here, and I'm asking them to share their journey on how they got here. And then I just pick up, because you really want to know somebody and know their journey, and be with them and understand them and be present. So when somebody invites me in, I applaud them, because it's a huge step. And it is one, I like to describe myself, Michelle, as their constant. So in your journey, I'm going to be your constant. So depending on what your path is, there's going to be people that come in and out. And this medical, like I said, we are so blessed. We have fabulous medical professionals in here. But there's going to be certain levels that you're going to need. And sometime there might be a nurse, and then all of a sudden there's an oncologist, or there's that geriatric psychologist coming in, or, so I'm always there as that constant. And as an end-of-life doula, one of the roles, and I always say to people, is I'm your keeper of the space. I was reading somewhere, and I can't remember who it was. It could have even been, it might have been Deepak Chopra or something. I was reading about holding the space, and they described it as guardian of the space, which, right? And I take this role, and it's,
I feel like holding space. Sometimes I think holding space is like this new age word. Do you know what I mean? Like, even when I host women's circles, like I'm like, we're just gonna hold space for each other, and people are like, well, what does that mean? Is it just is it just being present? Is it just that I'm just gonna listen? I want you to be seen and heard. Is that, like, what do you feel like holding space means, even that word?
It's funny, because it kind of goes like when you ask me, or somebody's asked me, like, how do you define you? And it's kind of like at the beginning, I was like, how do I define what I do? I just do it. I don't know how to define it. I just do it. But I think, and I agree, this holding space, right? But I can be that person who, if the journeyer is feeling angry, feeling scared, wanting to cry, but doesn't necessarily want to share that with their loved ones, right? I can be that person. And I'm not a fixer. I'm not going to fix anything, but I can take that in. And sometimes, Michelle, all we need is a really good friend or person just to get it off our chest, right? And it makes you feel good, and it helps you. Sometimes if we verbalize, we can process, the majority of my clients come up with their own answers to things, but I've given them, and I've held that space so they can actually process it and go, you know what? Yeah, like, I've never told somebody you should do this. It's always more of like, have you thought about this? Or, right?
Yes, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. And then as a doula, also, there's many different paths to take. So I become your navigator as well. So my resources, so depending on our conversations, my resources, like the list, is very long. And I'm just that navigator that perhaps, this is a moment that maybe we need a social worker, or maybe we need somebody. I can reach out to my contacts and offer that service, right? Then I can also come in as a pre-COVID, as a caregiver. I think that's been the hardest part of this whole COVID pandemic is we want to be present physically.
I can't even imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can't. Right. So then we have to figure out how to hold space in a different way. And I really think this is like you and I chatting. This is even a way, like when people listen to this podcast, they're going to see, you know what, we're holding space for somebody because something in here is going to resonate with somebody. Right. So, like one example I have, was a couple and she was living with dementia. And I ended up going weekly. And even if it was an hour or 2 hours, sometimes I just sit there and hold her hand. And sometimes we chat. We'd get to know both of them very well. But it was that outlet where her spouse could get out and he could go and do things. He could take an hour or 2 hours and be him, not be the caregiver. Because one thing COVID did was really put pressure on the caregivers in this world and those with loved ones that are living with cancer or living with dementia or whatever diagnosis it is. So that's where it's been hard during this time, but there is beauty in just giving somebody that hour break or that 2 hour break so they can just go and decompress, have a coffee, and not worry that their loved ones are in harm's way, right? So definitely companionship, respite care, I think is so important, because if the caregiver isn't healthy for themselves, the worry becomes what's going to happen to the one that's living with the life-limiting diagnosis, right? So there's all kinds, like this role is so dynamic.
And I'm sure like the conversations must be just so crucial. I'm assuming that you've had some of the hardest conversations you possibly can with people in how they transition, in what they're thinking about happens after they pass, or those final moments of care. Because even maybe it's also being able to trust somebody outside of your family. You kind of mentioned something that, some of the best advice I've received is not my family members. You just get to like say what you truly think without judgment and have just that listening ear. So I'm a even just the conversations around death must be so crucial in what you do.
Oh, totally. And that is why like these conversations are so important. So we as a society, Michelle, we've taken death and dying out of the home. We've institutionalized it. We've sterilized it, right? And that's been recent within the last 100 years or what have you. So when I took this course, it was kind of interesting, and it's really stuck with me, as we as women held this role many, many, many years ago. And like my husband's from the East Coast. So when we first met, and we were I don't even know how we were talking about it, because I want to make it clear. I mean, there's still a fear in me about this dying thing. Like but and I think that's in all of us. But he was like, oh yeah, we still have wakes and all of that. Like the body's in the house and 3-day wakes. And to him, it was commonplace. And growing up out west, I didn't experience that.
No.
In fact, I believe it was my uncle who passed away. And I can remember, I think I must have been about like 5 or so. And he had a brain tumor. And I can remember he wanted to see me before he died. So my mom came down and got me, and he was in the hospital. And I went up, and I can remember looking at him, and he gave me just like this little wave, right? But then I wasn't allowed, Michelle, to go to the funeral. So by taking the conversation out of our mainstream conversations, we've taken the most important transition that we are going to face, and we don't talk about it. And to me, that is heartbreaking, because I think if we actually brought it into our homes and brought it into that like the conversation now and talked about how we personally would feel, and how our feelings are around death and dying, the conversations that I have with people wouldn't be so difficult. And if we go into and look at advanced care planning, we should be doing our advanced care planning when we're healthy. Like right now,
well,
anybody.
I mean, I know that we touched on it once in one of our conversations, but like, you know, there are people that are having these dinner parties where they're talking about death. Like,
totally.
How do you want to die? Do you want to be cremated? What do you think happens to us? Like, I know that maybe it was kind of like a trendy thing, like death by dinner or something. I can't remember, like the
death over dinner.
Death over dinner.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that it sounds so morbid. Like for me, I mean, I can't imagine doing that with my family. We'd probably laugh maybe through it because we'd all be so uncomfortable. But do you obviously, do you think those are important things we should be doing?
Oh, I think we should be jumping all over them. Like when I took my doula course in 2019, honestly, Michelle, I was like, there's death cafes, there's death over dinner. Like, this is cool, right? So what I've done is I've kind of done some twists, and we've had to kind of make things work. So when it was acceptable to have people outside, right, for example, I did a Friday night wine around the fire pit.
Right.
And
I first saw actually one of your posts and I was like, okay, that sounds amazing. Like, you know, death is real to me right now. My grief is so real, and that just gives me an outlet to talk about it. It's not like this morbid, like, you know, like we don't talk about that kind of thing. You know, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And one of my typically my first question is, if you went to the doctor and the doctor said to you, you have 30 days to live.
Oh my God.
What would you do in those 30 days? Right? Mm-hmm. And I have a funny joke. Can I share this joke?
Yeah, please.
It is so funny. It just came to me, and it was the day I was married. So my husband, I took over the speech. He was supposed to do the speech and thank everybody, but I took it over. So he definitely made notice of that. So he told this joke at our wedding, and he said, this guy goes to the doctor and he's given 6 months to live. And the patient says, he's kind of like, oh my gosh. And the doctor says, well, what are you going to do with the 6 months of your life that you have left? He says, I'm going to go live with my mother-in-law. And he says, why are you going to go live with your mother-in-law? He says, because it's going to be the longest 6 months of my life.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh,
so sorry, it was just a sideway there.
Yeah, love it.
But you know, I mean, that's profound. And I think that's why right now where I'm at, and I've said our role is so dynamic, but I'm really around having this conversation. This conversation is so, so, so important. And we need to make it fun, and we need to make it interesting. And honestly, these conversations, they're beautiful. There's going to be fear. There's going to be tears. There's going to be worry. There's going to be relief, and it's just going to be beautiful. And I'm going to share with you, Michelle, just recently I have a wonderful client who's living with cancer at the moment. And we spoke, and we I guess probably spent a fair amount of time, together, and I'll say virtually, right? But we had to talk about getting her personal directive done. So one thing I always want to do is I want to create a safe space, and because these are difficult conversations to begin, right? But where I get this is the stuff, Michelle, that gives me empowerment to go forward and to express that. This is why I can say it's so, so, so important, right? So we got talking, and I really delve into what somebody's wishes and their values and their beliefs are. And a great resource that I always go to is diningwithdignity.ca. And it's all about personal directives. And we're very fortunate in Alberta and in Canada that we can designate an agent to act on our behalf in the event that we can no longer speak for ourselves. So we become incompetent, right? And so getting this groundwork laid, the conversations Michelle led us to, she knows who she wants at her bedside. She knows she wants to be at home when she passes. She knows what kind of pain medication relief that she has. She, we got even on the topic of conversation, and her spouse always sat on the outside, but you could tell he was listening, right? And we even got down to where it was like, hey, you know what about your coffin? Like, how do you, because there's getting to be so many great options out there for that time that we, with our remains. But I said, a really, really good friend growing up, one of my best friends growing up, when her mom passed away, the sons made her casket. And it was so beautiful, right? And so I shared that with my client, and I said, you know what I've seen too is this beautiful, like loved ones writing final love letters to the person on their casket or art or what have you. And this journey should be the journey for the ones who remain and the ones transitioning. And we should make this beautiful, and we should make this personal, and everybody should be involved. So these conversations should be brought home, and we should have them, because I know like there's no greater gift for me personally is being part of that journey and seeing the beauty that comes of this final goodbye.
Oh, Julie, you're killing me. Oh my gosh. But I just think of like, even the peace of mind you'd have in preparation. Do you know what I mean? So it's not something like unexpected. Like, when's it going to happen? How's it going to go down? But just like that planning piece of the preparation of understanding the steps. Like, okay, this could happen between these months, and this is what I want to happen. Just the anxiety that would release, or the stress of the unknown as it is anyway. And just something tangible about the end. It's not just, well, we don't know, So that is just so beautiful. I think that is just such an important part to, reflect on here, is that's what's really missing. What I'm assuming is missing, or even my own ideas of how people pass.
And it's like, it's a gift, right? And, like we even got down to, so one of the questions is, if you can eat at that time, if you're able to eat, what would be your last meal?
Oh my gosh.
And this client like looked at me and she said, cannolis. Right? But we've got this all written down. I said, okay, I'm on cannoli duty. Right? Like, I got a great Italian friend who makes the best cannolis. I'm on cannoli duty. But this is what happens, Michelle. This exchange, it creates laughter, but it also, like you said, it creates relief.
Yes.
Right? And then it's just I'm that one that can give you those thought-provoking questions or help you navigate with thought-provoking questions, right? And then we were writing down stuff and still conversing, and she says, oh, Julie, and she said, a vodka martini with 6 olives as well, right? And I said, okay, shaken, not stirred. She said shaken. So we've got her whole last meal. But what's so cool? Knowing this, if that person is not able to eat, at that time, right? There is beauty in the fact that you go out, you get those cannolis, and you have that vodka martini for that person.
Right.
And I think we have to remember, like you've probably sensed, I'm not saying my client has cancer. I'm saying my client is living with cancer. People are living with dementia, right? And my point in this is we all live, we are all alive until our last breath. So these conversations help us as family and help our loved one that's journeying live until the last breath. And there is such tremendous beauty and gift. And I really think that that helps us to move through the grief, right? And like we had one person who you're familiar with during one of our readings. Tony was fabulous, but he wanted to be at home, wanted to die at home. We made it happen. And no, there was no eating at that time, but he died at home. And after his death, we laid out his body lovely in his den. He was in his den on his couch, and everybody could come and go and say their goodbyes. And this was probably like around supper time, right? And his son-in-law ordered pizza. And we went into the kitchen and we had a toast Tony. We ate pizza. And I think the funeral home was probably came around 10 o'clock, because what's a great thing about nowadays is when your loved one passes, you take all the time that you want. And I can help be that advocate if somebody says, no, that's not okay, but you take the time you want and you honor. And what was so beautiful, Michelle, about that whole transition is that while we were eating and sharing stories and honoring this beautiful life, people could go in and out and say their own goodbyes, right? So, but I think it's important, these conversations. I mean, some people may want to have their final days in a hospital, or they may need to, or they may want to be in a hospice, or they may want to be at home. But if we don't have these conversations, we as loved ones don't know that journey, or, and then you have somebody like me that can say, you know what, here it is, it's laid out. Your mom wanted to be at home. Let's see if we can make her wish come true, right?
Oh, it's so beautiful. It is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's something so, I guess we just don't even want to think about it. Like, I think about just being in denial of our own death every day, or like the value of our life, or even the habits that we have, or not working out, or what we're eating, or, that we're not necessarily thinking about our choices every day, especially when it comes to death and to life.
Yes.
So I mean, that's why this is so important to share this message today. I guess the biggest thing too is that there's like a way of preparing people here physically, but also like spiritually. I mean, this podcast, I always want to ask, what are your beliefs? What have you seen? Like, what do people believe happens after you pass? I know we've talked about it in our chats and even through some of my mediumship work. But what are your personal feelings about watching people die? Do their loved ones come to the bedside? Can they sense somebody greeting them? And what are your personal beliefs, even spiritually, around passing?
Oh my gosh, you bet. This is not the end, right? Like, this is my personal belief. This is not the end. I've had some beautiful bedside experiences. One was actually, Michelle, when I was in long-term care, and this woman was her last hours journeying home. And I mean, we all think we want a peaceful death and that, but sometimes people are very restless, right? And I could see this with this beautiful soul. And across the hall was a pastor and his wife was there visiting, right? And so I went over because I thought, you know what? I think like we need some prayer here, right? But I didn't feel in my role it was appropriate for me at the time to be that person, right? So I went and got the pastor's wife and explained, and she came over, and I think there was about 4 of us around the bedside, and we held the journeyer's hand, and we all were just in a circle. And this woman did a beautiful prayer and just asked for comfort and asked for release, and it was gorgeous. And the person just calmed right down, laid there, and in a half hour she went home. You know, and that was just, it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
And before, like, journeying home, what does that phrase mean to you, that we're journeying home?
Oh, that means go into the glory. Like I do believe in God, I believe in Jesus, and I believe in heaven. And I do believe in this, that we are going home. We came from this place, and we are, you know, we're going home. And I do believe that God knew what I had in myself to do this work, Michelle. And he's guided me, and I'm early on in this whole journey, but I'm loving it. And really, I do feel like I am doing God's work, and it is a calling. It really is a calling, and I am so blessed to be called in with people and their families, and to take this last walk. My goodness, I think it's our most important. And like you alluded to before, like you had a birth doula, and that person is your navigator bringing that beautiful baby.
Absolutely. And I could text about anything, any time of day, like, is this normal? What's happening here?
Yeah.
You know, I that comfort. Absolutely.
And then you think we as babies, we transition through all our stages, and we have all these dynamics and these experiences, positive or negative, that come in. And now, like this movement, this end of life doula movement, or death midwifery, thana doula, whatever people want to be called, right? We have these wonderful blessings that are helping people navigate the end journey. And it's incredible. It is incredible.
Wow. I mean, I'm sold. You know, I'm like, okay, I need to be talking about death with my family more. And also just, you know, even for myself, like if something were to happen to me, I also have a family member right now with cancer, and, you know, it's not life threatening at the moment. You know, but it could be, you don't know. Aging parents as well. These are things that I want to start thinking about as well, like talking about with my family, and those kind of things is just so crucial.
And you know what's great is talk about it now while there's no stress.
Right.
Because it's interesting, and it goes back, because we're not all greeted, like we don't know when our time is going to come, right? Or how it's going to come. And I've talked with people who have experienced sudden deaths of loved ones, right? And being friends and knowing the situation, and they said, you know, if they could have only been prepared. So that's maybe like having those conversations, because with the shock and the grief, and that they felt it was very overwhelming. So I think the more we can have our advanced care planning conversations, and what we want, if something sudden was to happen, we are prepared, and we know what our loved ones want. And that takes that stress out of that situation, because it's going to be a stressful situation, right? So that's like, I'm just, the conversation right now, even though I morph into different roles, my passion right now is having these conversations and just saying it's okay, and giving permission to people. in our healthy state is, you know, we're going to have it when we're sick, but why have it when we're sick when we can be having it when we're healthy and we can be living each moment?
Yeah.
There's a lot that the dying teach us as a living. Right? And I've really found in my work, it's to live in the moment. It's really to live in the moment and be prepared. And going back to my client who I'm working with now, that's what resonated with her is she says, I like things boom, boom, boom. So what our whole conversations around her personal directive and her final wishes and all that, that has given her such a sense of relief. And she said to me, she says, Julie, you have no idea. You have no idea what you have done for me. She says, I got this. She says, I'm empowered and I've got my plans all laid out. And that is one stress. So now she can focus on her chemo treatments and her radiation treatments or whatever, because that has been dealt with.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what a gift, Julie. I mean, I haven't met very many people in this world yet that are passionate about death and helping people have these really difficult conversations and actually just having like the heart and passion for it. It's so inspiring for me, coming out of trauma and grief. And yeah, it's just so beautiful. I'm so emotional.
Oh, well, you know what? I just,
You're changing people's lives and families' lives, It's just really beautiful. And so please, tell people where they can find you. Like, where can they know more about you? How can they come to some of these, wine by the fire death parties you have? Or, yeah, how can people just, learn more and hear more from you?
So, I really, I welcome the conversation. So I have my webpage, www.transitionwell.ca. I got my Facebook page as well as Instagram. And I always joke, and you'll see on my webpage, because there's certain pages that I haven't quite completed yet. And it says even web pages are in transition and more to come soon, right? So I'm a work in progress. But you know what? What I can say to anybody who's listening, if you don't know how to navigate that conversation with somebody else, first and foremost, navigate it with you, or bring somebody like me in, because there's these beautiful souls that will help you navigate it, but not just navigate it. They will empower you to have these conversations. They will stick by your side. They will take this journey with you. And, we don't know when it's going to come, but I'm even going to be sitting down with my 20-year-old and my 23-year-old, because as a mother, if something was to happen, I would want to know what they want, right? And I don't know if you've ever watched Grief Walker. If anybody, whoever's listening, if you get an opportunity to watch Grief Walker, there is some real poignant points in this documentary.
A show? Oh, a documentary. Okay.
It was on the National Film Board, and then I think it's on Prime now. I think it's come off the National Film Board of Canada, and I think it's on Prime. But what was very poignant in that is we are born to die. We just don't know the points, right? But more importantly, the second time I listened to that, as mothers, Michelle, we give birth. We're the creators of the world, right? Yeah. And he said, if somebody has to go through the loss of a child as yourself and that, right? You are a mother to that child. We never stop being mothers to our children, even when we pass on.
Yes.
And I've taken my role to a whole new level, going, I'm caring for somebody's child. Doesn't matter if that child's 99.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
That person is still a child to a mother. And I have a duty and an obligation to take that journey and make it the best journey and care for that child. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you, Julie. Oh, that's okay. How much can I actually cry? Like I have Kleenex after Kleenex. And it's just thank you. Thank you so much for your words. Thank you for your sharing your beautiful heart, your passion, these ideas. And I just hope whoever's listening is so intrigued by these ideas and the accessibility it is to have just a conversation about it. So important. And really also just, I loved in our prayer before our podcast, just all the people that are struggling right now during COVID-19, it just really puts another element on perspective of people that are really hurting right now and are in this transition right now without that physical support. So thank you for also, bringing that to my attention too. I think is an important reflection as well. So Julie, follow her Facebook page. You do host like online events. I know you had one just like this week. And it's just Transition Well is on or your Facebook page as well, where you can see those events.
And I'm
so grateful that our paths have crossed, Julie, and that we'll just probably keep talking about death. Especially for me, as I'm heading into this mediumship path of and peace of knowing like that we do exist, our souls do exist after we pass, and the gift of that I've been given, that I just hope that we can keep collaborating and talking about all that comes after this, so.
And I agree, Michelle, because you know what, I'm the keeper of that conversation, that journey, that soul, and your work is incredible because we do know we carry on, right? So I am so looking forward to all the work and all the collaboration that's to come for us. And I am so blessed to have you in my life.
I feel the same.
And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable.
Thank you. Okay, well, Els, thank you so much for joining us today. And a big thank you to Julie Handrahan. Please follow her at transitionwell.ca to learn more about how you can transition from this life into the next.